Can miracles be explained by science without diminishing the power of God? The resurrection of Lazarus after 4 days in the tomb challenges the boundaries between faith and reason. Could conditions like catalepsy or deep coma explain the event? This journey explores how science and divine intervention might coexist, where human understanding ends and the mystery of God begins. From the very beginning, the idea that God created the universe has shaped the foundation of human belief. Genesis opens with the powerful declaration, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." This isn't just a theological statement. It's a cosmic claim that every particle, every atom, every physical law we observe today originates from a divine intelligence. Modern science often seeks to explain the how, but rarely the why. It tells us how stars form, how gravity works, how cells divide. But the deeper question, why is there something rather than nothing, remains untouched. For believers, the answer is simple yet profound. The universe exists because it was spoken into being by God. But here is the mystery that bridges two worlds. What if science itself is the language God used to create the universe? What if every natural law we discover is not a contradiction to faith, but a revelation of God's order? When physicists uncover the precision of the constants that govern the universe, like the speed of light, the strength of gravity, or the fine-tuning of the fundamental forces, they often admit how incredibly unlikely it is that such a balanced system happened by chance. This leads many to the idea of intelligent design. But for the believer, this intelligence has a name: God. God did not just create the world and step back. He designed a universe that follows consistent, elegant, and discoverable laws, what we now call science. These laws are not in opposition to God's power. Rather, they are expressions of His will. Consider this. When we study the periodic table, when we examine DNA, when we map the stars, we are not pulling away from God. We are looking deeper into His blueprint. Science, then, is not secular, it is sacred. It's the unfolding of the mind of God through the eyes of discovery. Many of the world's greatest scientific minds believed this. Isaac Newton, perhaps the most influential physicist of all time, believed his discoveries revealed the divine structure of the universe. He once wrote, "This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being." Similarly, Louis Pasteur, the father of microbiology, said, "The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator." These weren't just religious sentiments. They were conclusions drawn from scientific awe. They saw science not as the enemy of faith, but as its companion. Now, let's return to the story of Lazarus. Jesus raises him from the dead after 4 days in the tomb. From a scientific standpoint, we might ask, could this have been catalepsy? A coma so deep that he was mistakenly believed to be dead. Such conditions exist cases where breathing slows, heart rate drops, and consciousness disappears to undetectable levels. But even if Lazarus' condition were medically explainable, it does not remove the miracle. Why? Because Jesus knew. He arrived exactly when He meant to. He wept. He prayed. Then He called Lazarus by name. And Lazarus responded. This is the essence of divine action. God working through the systems He created. Whether by suspending natural laws or using them in perfect timing, God remains the author and master of all. Therefore, science does not disprove miracles. Rather, it helps us appreciate how precise and powerful a miracle truly is. It's not just that something impossible happened, but that it happened at the right moment, to the right person for a greater purpose. The laws of biology, chemistry, and physics were created by God to govern life. But He also holds the power to go beyond them. Just as a composer can break rhythm to create beauty, so too can God interrupt natural order, not chaotically, but intentionally to reveal His glory. In this way, Science is not a threat to faith. It is a lens through which we can see the fingerprints of the divine. The more we explore, the more we find that the universe is not just functional. It is intelligently designed, purpose-driven, and deeply beautiful. To believe in creation is not to reject science. It is to embrace its highest meaning. That behind every law is a lawgiver, and behind every discovery is a divine designer whose voice still echoes through the cosmos. In the end, perhaps science and faith are not two separate paths, but two sides of the same mystery, one that begins with awe and ends with wonder. Throughout the Bible, miracles are powerful moments when the laws of nature appear to be suspended. Water turns into wine, the blind see, the dead rise, and seas are parted. These events are often seen as divine signatures, evidence that God is present and active in the world. But as science progresses, we begin to ask, could some of these events have natural explanations? And if so, does that make them any less miraculous? Let's explore a few well-known biblical miracles and how science might offer insights not to disprove, but to illuminate how God could have worked through natural means. Take, for example, the parting of the Red Sea. In the book of Exodus, Moses raises his staff and the waters divide, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. Some scientists propose a natural explanation called a wind set down effect, a rare meteorological phenomenon where strong, sustained winds can push water away, exposing land underneath. In 2010, researchers even modeled this event and found that under the right conditions, it could occur. But here is the deeper question. What are the odds that such a rare event would happen at the precise moment Moses needed it, and in exactly the right place? Science may describe the how, but it cannot explain the why or the timing. That's where God enters. Even if wind and physics were involved, the miracle lies in the orchestration, the divine coordination that no human could plan. Now consider the healing of the blind. In the Gospel of John, Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud, applies it to a man's eyes, and tells him to wash. The man regains his sight. Medical science knows of rare eye diseases that can suddenly improve, or conditions where vision was never lost physically but psychologically. However, this healing occurred instantly, with mud and on command. Coincidence? Or a divine act working through the very biology he designed? The resurrection of Lazarus after 4 days in the tomb is perhaps the most astonishing case. From a medical perspective, conditions like catalepsy, deep coma, or suspended animation come to mind. In such states, bodily functions are so slowed that death can be mistaken. Yet even today, after 4 days without intervention, a body would show clear signs of decay. The Gospel of John is clear. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. His sister even warned that his body would have a bad odor. But when Jesus called him out, Lazarus walked alive from the tomb. Could God have sustained his life through some unknown biological preservation? Perhaps, but again, it's not just the biology, it's the moment, the message, and the messenger. Even the Star of Bethlehem, which guided the Magi to the birthplace of Jesus, has been studied astronomically. Some scholars believe it may have been a planetary conjunction or rare celestial event. But what are the chances it would happen at the exact time of Jesus' birth, and that it would guide the wise men with such precision? Once again, science may observe, but only God can orchestrate. These reflections reveal something important. A scientific explanation does not eliminate divine action. In fact, it often enhances our awe. When we understand the delicate balance of life and nature, we see how miraculous even ordinary existence is. Imagine if Lazarus had been in a deep coma. What are the odds of surviving without food, water, or medical care for 4 days in a cave in ancient Judea, and waking up at the exact moment Jesus called his name? Such a possibility doesn't weaken the story. It makes it even more astonishing. Some critics argue that giving scientific explanations to miracles explains away God. But this is a narrow view. It assumes that God must violate natural laws to act. In truth, God authored those laws. He can work within them, bend them, pause them, or transcend them, because he owns them. Think of it like an artist painting on canvas. Sometimes the strokes are bold and visible. Other times, they are subtle and hidden. But every detail, whether seen or not, serves the purpose of the masterpiece. In the same way, God's hand can be loud or silent, obvious or mysterious, but it is always there. This understanding opens a beautiful possibility. Science doesn't compete with God. It reveals him. The laws of physics are not a barrier to miracles. They are the tools of a divine craftsman. In the modern world, we now know how rainbows form, how storms are generated, and how diseases can be cured. But that doesn't make them any less wondrous. Knowing the process doesn't remove the miracle. It helps us appreciate its complexity and beauty. So, when we read about the miracles in the Bible, whether they involved healing, resurrection, or divine signs, we must not be afraid to ask questions. But our goal should not be to explain them away. Our goal should be to see how God may have used the laws he created to reveal his glory. In the end, science may provide plausible mechanisms, but it cannot explain the will, purpose, or message behind these events. And that is where faith steps in, not to replace science, but to elevate our understanding to a divine perspective. Miracles are not just moments of impossibility. They are windows into the heart of a God who works in ways both natural and supernatural, ways that remind us that he is still present, still powerful, and still writing his story in our world. What if the universe isn't merely a collection of mechanical systems and blind forces, but a mirror reflecting the majesty of its creator? What if every law of physics, every principle of biology, and every structure in chemistry is not a limitation to God's power, but a testament to it? From the smallest particle to the vast galaxies, our universe is governed by elegant and precise laws. Gravity pulls. Light travels at a constant speed. DNA replicates with breathtaking accuracy. These are not random phenomena, they are signs of order. And behind that order is something or someone eternal. For centuries, philosophers and theologians have pondered how the immutability of natural laws relates to the sovereignty of God. If God is all-powerful, why does he choose to operate within laws? The answer may be both humbling and magnificent, because the laws themselves are his creation. When we study the laws of nature, we're not uncovering a godless system. We're exploring a system built by God. The laws of thermodynamics, electromagnetism, and planetary motion aren't secular principles. They are the language of divine consistency. They are how God keeps his promises in the physical world. The book of Job, one of the oldest texts in the Bible, asks, "Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth?" This question, posed by God himself, invites us not to reject science, but to marvel at the wisdom behind it. Miracles, then, are not necessarily violations of natural law. They can be seen as superseding acts, God using, redirecting, or pausing the system he designed. Imagine an architect who builds a self-operating smart home. The home runs automatically, but the architect can intervene at any time, changing the temperature, dimming the lights, even reversing a door's direction, not breaking the system, but using it differently. In the story of Lazarus, we see a man declared dead for 4 days. In the natural world, death is irreversible. Decomposition sets in. Cells die, oxygen is lost, the brain shuts down. And yet, Jesus speaks, and Lazarus lives again. This isn't just resurrection. It's a command over biological law issued by the very author of life. Some may say, but if it's possible to be revived after 4 days, doesn't that explain the miracle? No, it deepens it. Because even if Lazarus were somehow in a state of suspended animation or coma, the miracle would be in the knowledge, timing, and power of Jesus to reverse the process. Let's consider another example: Jesus walking on water. From a physics perspective, this defies everything we know about mass, density, and surface tension. Could there have been a hidden platform or an illusion caused by the early morning light? Some have speculated so, but none of these theories account for the context: a storm-tossed sea, disciples in terror, and Jesus calmly walking toward them. This wasn't a trick. It was a statement of divine dominion over creation. And yet, none of these events diminish natural law. In fact, they highlight it, because it is only by knowing how water behaves that we recognize how profound it is when Jesus walks across it. The miracle stands out because the natural law is real. Here lies a deep truth. Natural law and divine action are not opposites. They are complementary. God created a world of consistency so that we could live, learn, and thrive. But He is not confined by it. When He acts miraculously, He doesn't destroy the system. He shows that He is still above it. Think of light. We know it behaves both as a wave and a particle, two realities in one, an idea once thought impossible. Yet quantum physics tells us both are true, depending on how we observe it. This mystery hints at something greater, that our understanding is limited, and reality often stretches beyond logic. Likewise, the miracles of the Bible are not contradictions. They are invitations. They invite us to look beyond the surface, beyond what we know, and see a reality where the divine and natural coexist. A reality where God uses His creation not just to sustain life, but to communicate love, power, and truth. The resurrection of Lazarus, the healing of the sick, the calming of storms, these are not moments when God breaks the rules. They are moments when He reminds us He wrote them. And if He wrote them, He can move through them, bend them, or pause them for a higher purpose. Faith, then, is not believing in the impossible. It's believing that the God who made all things still holds all things, and that the systems He designed are under His control, even when they are paused or redirected for divine reasons. In a world obsessed with certainty, control, and evidence, we often forget that mystery is part of truth. The laws of nature are reliable, but the God behind them is limitless. Science can describe the structure, but faith helps us glimpse the spirit that breathes through it. So the next time we see a miracle, whether in Scripture or in life, let us not rush to explain it away. Instead, let us recognize it for what it is: a moment when the Creator speaks again, and the laws He wrote stand still, waiting to obey. Among all the miracles in the Bible, the resurrection of Lazarus stands out as one of the most astonishing and emotionally charged. Found in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, the story portrays Jesus arriving at the tomb of His dear friend, 4 days after Lazarus had died. With a simple but commanding voice, He calls, "Lazarus, come out," and the dead man walks out alive. But could there be more to this event than a supernatural act? Could science offer insight without denying the divine? Let's consider the possibility of catalepsy, a rare neurological condition in which the body enters a state of immobility and unresponsiveness. In extreme cases, breathing and heart rate drop so significantly that a person may be mistakenly declared dead. Historically, there have been documented cases of people being buried alive due to this phenomenon. Some also point to suspended animation or deep coma, where the body's metabolic functions slow down drastically, allowing survival under extreme conditions. Modern science has even explored therapeutic hypothermia, slowing the body's processes to preserve life after trauma. So, could Lazarus have suffered a severe trauma or illness, entered a death-like state, and somehow survived for 4 days? From a purely scientific standpoint, this seems almost impossible. Without refrigeration or modern preservation techniques, a body in the hot climate of ancient Judea would begin to decompose rapidly. In fact, Martha, Lazarus' sister, warned Jesus, "Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." This detail underscores the fact that those present believe Lazarus was not only dead, but irreversibly so. Yet Jesus insists. He prays. Then he speaks not with uncertainty, but with authority. And Lazarus walks out, still wrapped in grave clothes. So, what if we imagine that a rare condition like catalepsy occurred? What if Lazarus had not truly died, but instead was in a death-like coma? Would that explain the event? Not fully. Because then we must ask. The New Testament overflows with miracles that stretch the limits of human understanding. Jesus healing the sick, restoring sight to the blind, calming violent storms, feeding thousands, and even rising from the dead. These stories were written not just as historical records, but as spiritual declarations. God is near, active, and sovereign over all creation. In a world increasingly guided by science, some ask, could there be natural explanations behind these supernatural events? And if so, would that diminish the power of God? To explore this question is not to deny faith, but to deepen it. Science seeks patterns, evidence, and causality. It asks how. Faith, on the other hand, asks why. When combined, they offer a richer understanding of both the material and the divine. Take the healing miracles. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus restores health instantly and completely, blind eyes open. Paralyzed limbs walk. Lifelong illnesses vanish with a word or a touch. Modern medicine understands how some of these conditions may function biologically. For example, sudden healing could theoretically be linked to psychosomatic factors, spontaneous remission, or misdiagnosed ailments. Yet, the biblical accounts offer more than just unexplained recoveries. These events happen at precise moments, often in front of crowds, following acts of faith. The healing is not only physical, it's spiritual, symbolic, and personal. Jesus does not merely cure diseases. He restores people to dignity, family, and community. That transcends biology. Then there's the calming of the storm. Jesus and his disciples are in a boat on the Sea of Galilee when a furious storm threatens to drown them. Jesus wakes and says, "Peace, be still." And instantly, the wind and waves cease. Meteorology tells us that storms can suddenly shift. But in this case, the storm doesn't fade gradually. It stops immediately at Jesus' command. The miracle lies not in nature's change, but in its response to a voice. Science can describe how weather behaves, but not how it could be stilled by a single sentence spoken in faith. Consider also the miracle of Jesus walking on water. Some skeptics have suggested he may have walked along a shallow sandbar or that an optical illusion occurred. But the Gospel describes a stormy sea, far from shore, with panicked disciples watching. Jesus' approach is calm, deliberate, and impossible by human standards. When Peter briefly walks toward him and then begins to sink, the story becomes more than a physical anomaly. It becomes a metaphor for faith and fear. The miracle is not just about physics. It's about trust, presence, and divine authority over chaos. In the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus multiplies 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed a massive crowd. Some suggest it was a symbolic event. People were inspired to share their hidden food. But the Gospel emphasizes the miraculous abundance. Thousands are fed, and 12 baskets are left over. There's no sleight of hand here, no logistical trick. It is an act of divine provision. Could quantum theory one day explain matter transformation? Possibly. But even if science could recreate the mechanism, it would still lack the divine intentionality, the miracle behind the miracle. And then we come to the resurrection, the cornerstone of Christian belief. Jesus is crucified, buried, and sealed in a tomb. 3 days later, the tomb is empty, and he is seen alive by dozens, then hundreds. Some skeptics propose the swoon theory, suggesting Jesus never died, only passed out and recovered. But Roman executioners were trained killers. Jesus was pierced through the side, buried in cloth, placed in a sealed tomb guarded by soldiers. If he survived all that and appeared in a fully restored state, it would be a medical miracle beyond explanation. But the resurrection is more than a comeback. It is a reversal of death, a divine declaration that life conquers the grave. What unites these miracles is not just their physical impossibility, but their divine timing, purpose, and impact. They happen not as random anomalies, but as signs that point to a God who is deeply involved with his creation. They serve as spiritual turning points, personal revelations, and public demonstrations of Jesus' identity. In this light, science and faith are not enemies. Science reveals the elegance of natural law. Faith reveals the one who wrote those laws. God created a world of order and consistency so that life could flourish, but he also retains the freedom to act above and beyond it. Miracles do not contradict science. They surpass it, not because they are illogical, but because they belong to a higher logic, one that includes love, purpose, and redemption. Science can describe the healing of a broken body, but it cannot explain the restoration of a soul. It can measure brainwaves, but not the moment when hope returns. It can track the motion of water, but not why it would respond to a command. It can examine cells, but not why death would reverse at the name of Jesus. In the New Testament, miracles are not merely divine magic tricks. They are moments where eternity breaks into time, where the Creator shows that he is still near, still active, still Lord of all. When we search for scientific explanations, we don't weaken the miracle. We strengthen our awe. Because if God can work through natural laws, he can also gently bend them to reveal himself. And whether he uses biology or goes beyond it, the message remains. He is with us, and nothing is impossible for him. As we journey through the interplay of miracles, faith, and science, we arrive at a humbling truth. While science is a powerful tool for understanding the natural world, it will always encounter limits when trying to grasp the fullness of the divine. The universe is vast, intricate, and governed by laws that science seeks to uncover and explain. Yet beyond those laws lies a mystery far greater too. Science operates from a human perspective, bound by observation, repeatability, and measurable evidence. It asks tough questions. How does this happen? What causes that? Through centuries of discovery, science has revealed astonishing truths about the cosmos, the complexity of life, and the forces that shape reality. It uncovers patterns and principles, giving us tools to improve health, technology, and quality of life. But science's very strength is also its boundary. It cannot address questions of ultimate meaning, purpose, or the supernatural. It cannot measure love, faith, or the presence of God. These transcend the physical and enter the awe. Miracles like the resurrection of Lazarus remind us that God as power is not limited to natural laws, but transcends them. Where science sees death as final, God shows that life is eternal. Where science measures time in linear progression, God operates beyond time, capable of turning back the clock or stepping outside it. The tension between science and faith is not a battle, but a dialogue. Science reveals the how of the universe. Faith reveals the why. Understanding DNA or brain function does not explain why consciousness or love exists. Studying the stars does not explain why the cosmos exists at all. This perspective invites us to embrace mystery, not as a gap to fear or ignore, but as a space where wonder and reverence grow. The limits of science are not a failure, but a reminder that human knowledge is finite. God's knowledge, by contrast, is infinite and beyond comprehension. Consider the words of the Apostle Paul. For now we see through a glass, darkly, but then face to face. Our current understanding is partial and obscured. But one day, the veil will be lifted, and we will perceive the fullness of divine truth. Until then, science and faith walk hand in hand. Science enriches our appreciation of creation, while faith connects us to the Creator. Both are gift tools to explore reality, each within its domain. Ultimately, the greatest miracle is that a loving God chooses to reveal Himself to imperfect humans. Whether through scripture, experience, or the unexplained moments we call miracles, God invites us into relationship beyond reason and knowledge. In this light, science is not a rival, but a partner illuminating the natural world, while faith opens the door to the supernatural. Together, they remind us that there is more to existence than meets the eye, and that the divine mystery is the greatest journey of all. How did Jesus know Lazarus was alive when no one else did? Why did He wait exactly 4 days long enough to ensure that everyone believed Lazarus was truly dead? Why did Lazarus recover instantly and completely, with no long-term physical damage or signs of starvation, dehydration, or neurological trauma? Science might attempt to provide partial mechanisms, but it cannot account for the timing, intention, and spiritual impact of the moment. The miracle of Lazarus is not just about biology. It's about hope beyond despair, life after death, and the authority of Jesus over the grave. This miracle served a greater purpose, to reveal who Jesus truly was. As He said to Martha, "I am the resurrection and the life." If we reduce the story to a medical fluke, we miss the core. This was a public demonstration of divine power at the perfect moment, with a profound message. People who had lost faith witnessed something impossible. The dead man returned fully alive, fully restored. In our modern world, we often seek certainty. We want to categorize, explain, and understand. And science is a beautiful tool for doing exactly that. But it has limits. It can describe physical processes, but not divine will. It can measure brain waves and heartbeats, but not faith, love, or divine timing. That's why this chapter is not about disproving science, but about seeing how science and faith can stand side by side. God is not limited to working against natural laws. He can work within them in extraordinary ways, or choose to override them completely. In the resurrection of Lazarus, perhaps He did both. Perhaps the miracle wasn't just in reviving a dead man, but in doing so with precision, purpose, and undeniable impact. Jesus didn't perform this miracle in private. He did it in front of a crowd. And the gospel tells us that many believed in Him because of what they saw that day. That was the goal, not just to bring Lazarus back, but to bring people to faith. Science might one day explain more of what happens in states of suspended animation. We may discover new insights into consciousness, cellular death, and revival. But no discovery will ever diminish what happened that day outside Lazarus' tomb. Because the heart of the miracle isn't just in the biology, it is in the message that God has power over death, and that life is never truly lost in His hands. So we can explore the science. We can consider coma, catalepsy, and the boundaries of human survival. But in the end, we must admit, something greater was at work. Something science alone cannot explain. Lazarus' return was not just a biological anomaly. It was a divine appointment, a moment when heaven touched earth, and the breath of God stirred life where no life should have remained. It reminds us that miracles don't always break the laws of nature. They often fulfill a deeper law, one written by the hand of God Himself.